Our protagonist today is Ran Aberrant. He's the seventh prince. In the Emperor's and his brother's eyes, he's a lazy, timid, useless hedonist. He deliberately cultivated that bad reputation so other powers would write him off as a rival for the throne. Unlike the other princes, who are crazily scheming for power, Ran's only goal is to escape the cramped palace and enjoy a carefree life. A pang of regret rang out. If only I hadn't listened to that bastard. Back then, Jimmy had proudly ordered me not to overthink it. Just sign here. The pen in Ran's hand hesitated a little. He asked again hesitantly, but is this really safe? Heard that, the man slammed the table in irritation and shouted, "Come on, what did I just say? I told you not to overthink." Jimmy put on a friendly tone. You think I'd trick my third-rate buddy? I've explained everything. Capital protection and even compound interest, my friend. He kept coaxing Ran. Just put your money in here and it will make money by itself. I'm not telling anyone about this sweet deal. I called you alone because I trust you. Jimmy used words to tug at his heart. Imagine having to take a work call at your father's funeral, and then bowing and scraping before that old boss. I've felt so sorry for you. Ran ground his teeth, thinking that when Jimmy mentioned his father, he'd been briefly enraged, but couldn't do anything about it. Putting the pen down, he silently prayed that the kindness in front of him was real. At that moment, it was the only thing he could do. Recalling Jimmy's sly face, Ran cursed himself for being such an idiot. Time flew. 2 years later, morning light slipped through the blinds, revealing a messy room. Ran sat in the bathroom, vomiting uncontrollably. His face was blank. Ran cursed in annoyance. Damn it. Bought a few snacks and threw up every last bite. He knew one thing. As a normal 28-year-old man in Korea, his life was far more pathetic now. Ran looked at the pile of books beside him in helplessness. The bastard who caused this vanished for a year without contact, and he lived like trash, drowning in debt. He lingered over the novel on the table, telling himself, there's 5 more hours until my shift. I'll read a bit then sleep. Indeed, Ran's only joy in this rotten life was the novel dark header. He reached for it muttering, just 30 minutes. Sitting on the bed, Ran started calculating. I've probably reread this over 100 times, but it still grips me. I know the plot inside out. He began flipping through the pages, with the thought that this was the only escape to forget his shitty life, even if just a little. Suddenly, Ran's gaze was drawn elsewhere. Outside the window, 2 raven feathers were drifting down. Ran blinked, wondering, what's this feather? His eyes dazedly noted the black feather. Suddenly, blood began welling from Ran's nose and mouth in his confusion. Watching the spray of blood, Ran asked in bewilderment, what the hell is this? A sharp pain hit him, and all he could do was clutch his heart. Ran vomited another mouthful of blood, thinking in pain that he couldn't breathe. Ran's face went pale in an instant. He cursed helplessly, damn my life. His whole body seethed with resentment. Could I really die like this, so absurdly? Ran leaned against the headboard thinking. Just as he was about to let go and accept it, a surge of anger boiled up inside. Unexpectedly, the last face to pop into his head at this moment was that bastard. He remembered Jimmy's arrogant smirk. More black raven feathers began appearing around Ran, but all he could do was slump there powerless. Damn it, I couldn't do anything. A pitch-black space enveloped him, broken voices echoing. Ran snapped his eyes open in a dazed panic. He sprang up bewildered, asking, what just happened? Was that a dream? Ran's eyes widened in astonishment. Looking around, Ran grew even more confused. Where is this? He kept muttering, what the hell corner of the world am I in? Suddenly a sound rang out, catching Ran's attention. Outside, a black crow tilted its head and watched him. Ran stared at the tree full of crows outside and blurted, A black crow suddenly slammed into the door and flew in, startling him. Ran panicked and screamed, help me, his heart racing. What kind of freaky nightmare is this? Is it because I've been sleep-deprived lately? The crow kept coming closer and cawing louder. Ran squeezed his eyes shut, begging, please let me wake up from this dream, please. Yet contrary to his fear, the crow gently nudged its head against Ran's hand. He sat up puzzled and played with it, wondering, what's with this crow? Why's it suddenly so friendly? After a while, the black crow also left. It left together with the flock outside. Seeing that, Ran's eyes widened in shock. Wait, this is... He looked around at the scene outside and realized, could this place be? Ran went to the window to check himself, thinking at first he was confused, but he quickly recognized this wasn't the reality he once knew. He guessed aloud, maybe this place is. Before he could fully process it, a voice called from outside, Prince Ran, I'm Anna, may I come in? Ran, alarmed, turned and shouted, wait, no, hold on, don't open the door, I'm just feeling unwell. Hearing the loud voice inside, Anna startled and paused. Ran collapsed face first to the floor, his whole body trembling in pain. Oh, my head. She understood and left him. I'll come back later then. Meanwhile, he quickly grasped the situation. Ran's suspicion was right. Rubbing his head in pain, he thought, this place is the novel I've read countless times. It's the world of Dark Header, and the person he just inhabited is the seventh prince of this empire, Ran. At that thought, Ran felt even more helpless. The guy's fate is to die horribly at the start of the story. Damn it, seriously damn it. He sat slumped beside the bed, thinking, damn it, how did this happen? Can't believe I woke up inside a novel, but why did it have to be this jerk? As Ran was lost in thought, someone approached and announced, Your Highness, I am Sane. Ran's expression immediately fell, and his gaze turned icy. Sane, the seventh prince's attendant. He pushed the door open and entered, saying he'd heard Your Highness skipped dinner, so out of concern, I came personally. Sane adjusted his glasses and inquired, I've prepared a modest meal. Are you feeling any better? Ran paused a moment, telling himself to stay calm. First, pretend to be Ran. Then he slowly stood and said, I feel much better now. Sane looked a bit puzzled but replied, that's a relief. He ordered the maid, Anna, quickly serve the food to His Highness. She obeyed. Yes, understood, sir. Ran politely said, thanks. Watching Anna arrange the dishes, he couldn't help judging. Why is she trembling like that? Is this even real food? It looks no different from dog food. Impatient, Ran reached out and said, just hand it to me. I can pour the tea myself. But that startled Anna, and she knocked over the teapot. She froze on the spot, not knowing what to do. Anna panicked and dropped to her knees by the puddle, begging for forgiveness. Ran wondered in confusion, what's wrong with? Why overreact like she'd caused a catastrophe? Anna hurriedly wiped the spill and kept apologizing. I'm sorry, I'm truly sorry, sir. After a moment, he realized the issue. Oh right, it's because Ran was originally a complete bastard. Ran recalled from the novel that he not only smashed things and used violence on whims, but when in a foul mood he'd even kill a servant. Anna muttered as she sped up cleaning, I'm worthy of death, please spare me. In fact, Ran was the most despicable villain in Dark Header's opening arc. Just then Sane spoke from behind, I'm sorry to disturb your meal, but I didn't expect the noble prince to fall ill. Anyway, seeing you're well now, I'm relieved. He produced a proposal ledger. Sorry to bother you during dinner, but Sane opened it and placed it on the table like an order. Please sign this budget proposal first. These matters are extremely important. Ran frowned when the man shoved a pen into his hand, cursing inwardly, important my ass. All liars. What important business could an incompetent seventh prince possibly have? Eyeing the papers, he bluntly judged them a stack of forgeries. Their real aim was to embezzle the seventh prince's fund. Ran looked at Sane, swaggering there, and remembered why a lowly attendant like him could run rampant. He's related to the Empress, and that powerful Empress's influence stretches across the whole realm. He gently set the pen down, thinking the previous owner of this body was an idiot who knew nothing of such things. I shouldn't deviate from the original plot, so do I still have to sign this? Seeing Ran hesitate, Sane hurriedly mocked, Have you forgotten how to sign, Your Highness? Even a prince should find that embarrassing, his tone dripping with contempt. Ran felt irritated, royal blood yet openly scorned by a mere servant. Of all the novels to be trapped in, why did it have to be this trashy seventh prince? Sane kept pushing his glasses up and said, Pathetic indeed, but isn't that why you need me? So Your Highness, don't overthink, just sign here. At that, Ran's whole body froze. He remembered that day, Jimmy had used the same condescending tone. Don't overthink it, just sign here. He grit his teeth and cursed inwardly. Damn it, isn't this exactly like the reality where I'm always being used? Then Ran exhaled and made up his mind. No, I won't live in humiliation like this anymore. He spoke coldly, making the man's face fall. Sane, come to think of it, something's off here, this blatantly wasting the budget. Sane curled his lip and replied with a surprised tone. Well, that's unexpected. I didn't think you'd see it that way. I apparently underestimated Your Highness. He put on a dark, threatening expression. But your food is getting cold. If you sign first, I'll look into that afterwards. He urged loudly, so Your Highness, don't overthink it, just sign. At that moment, a teapot was hurled over. Anna jumped in fright. The large teapot shattered, taking Sane's glasses with it. He stood there bewildered and demanded, Your Highness, what is the meaning of this? Ran answered utterly calmly, sorry, I slipped. Inwardly, he kept judging, having dissected this novel over 100 times. Ignorance is not an option. It's true Sane is related to the Empress, but in reality it's the kind of distant tie that barely registers. So distant the Empress probably doesn't even know he exists. Sane froze, angry, scrutinizing. Your Highness, what on earth are you doing? Then Ran flung his arm and overturned the table outright. The move left the man momentarily stunned. Ran's gaze darkened. He thought, I have no idea how I ended up here, but I'm not going to meekly die a ridiculous death like in the original story. He said coolly and coldly, You distracted me, that's why I slipped. Aren't you going to take responsibility for this? Ran thought wearily, in my previous life I was born with nothing, always looked down on, always the victim. I'm not living like that anymore, relying on all the knowledge from the novel and the seventh prince's authority. He once again urged, saying, "What are you still standing there for?" Ran pointed down and said, "The rug's filthy." His whole presence radiated iciness as he ordered, "Clean it up now." Rand's only thought then was singular: survive at all costs. Sane privately assessed, royalty are gods, everything exists to serve them. He irritably wondered, those special abilities only royals possess and that glorious golden hair, aren't they the embodiment of divinity and a symbol of nobility? Their dominance is self-evident. Zane's face showed contempt. He thought, of course, except for that pathetic seventh prince. He angrily judged Ran. He's stupid and brusque, and to top it off, that awful jet-black hair. Does that even count as royalty? Zane ground his teeth in fury. Some miserable coward who lives by groveling before the other princes. After all the bribes I've spent, was it to serve someone like? Yet Zane still had to bow his head and clean. He cursed himself silently. Damn. This wasn't the time for mopping floors. After a while he reported, "Your Highness, I've cleaned it up." As he was about to leave, another cup was thrown down. "Then I'll take my leave." Zane jolted up and shouted, "Your Highness, what do you mean by acting like this?" Rand snapped back bluntly, "For such a trivial thing you wasted so much time. Use this as practice." He ordered coldly, "Clean it quickly." Zane bowed his head and muttered, "You've been acting strange today. I wonder how I'm supposed to report this to the Empress." After hearing that, Rand sighed in annoyance. "I don't even stand a chance with the Empress, and he still threatens me. Apparently that's not enough to wake him up. Better make things clear so he doesn't ruin himself later." He turned to Anna and said, "Cover your ears." She blinked blankly and answered, "Okay, my ears, sir." Rand threatened in a dangerous tone, "This isn't something someone like you is allowed to hear. If you eavesdrop even one word, I'll make you work until you have no fingers left." Anna screamed in terror, "Ah, why yes, yes," and she clapped both hands over her ears and hung her head. From Anna's ears came only faint, unclear snippets of Rand's words. Whatever he said, Zane's expression grew paler and paler. Sweat poured down his face. Back in reality, Anna whispered it all over, and his face drained of color as if he'd seen a corpse. She murmured, puzzled, to the other maids, reminding them, "Haven't you noticed the seventh prince has been acting odd since that day?" They all nodded in agreement. Anna might have a point. Anna blurted out, "You all see it too, right?" "I do." Before she could finish, the other maids burst into rivers of tears and complaints. "He's gotten much scarier. Will we even be alive next year?" They kept whispering among themselves, "At least we avoid seeing him lately. That makes things less stressful. Yeah, he won't go out and just hides in the palace." Then someone suddenly asked, "Hey Anna, aren't you supposed to be working elsewhere? Weren't you on the cleaning rota today?" Anna only then snapped to and cried, "Oh no." At the same time, in his office bathed in sunlight, Rand couldn't help but sigh. What lovely weather today. He held his teacup at the window and planned, "As long as I play the part of the seventh prince from the book, no one will suspect a thing. The servants already seem scared and are avoiding me." He remembered Sane trudging away that day, and since then Sane hadn't dared act up. Actually, he hadn't even come near him. Well, fine. I don't want to smash any more teapots on people's heads. Rand leisurely sipped his hot tea, thinking that he could be so relaxed because time was on his side. 1 year before the plot starts, 3 years before I have to die. The novel I'd read 100 times, Dark Header. I still remember finding that tattered book in a corner of the local library. Thinking back, I was obsessed with it. He calmly calculated, the male lead hasn't appeared yet, and the story hasn't truly begun, so for now I'll enjoy this free time like a nobleman. Rand looked outside and thought, the weather really is beautiful. If only I had wings to see this view from above. Suddenly at that moment, his body felt an electric jolt run through it. The teacup in Rand's hand slipped and crashed to the floor, shattering. Rand slumped forward in irritation, wondering, what the heck was that? Why am I suddenly burning up? He grit his teeth and tried to endure. The sensation was different from last time. His whole body felt like it was on fire. Just then Anna's voice rang from outside. "Your Highness, are you in there?" "It's Anna, may I come into the study to clean?" Rand's eyes shot toward the door, panicked, "Help, please help me." Outside, Anna pushed the door open with a sigh of relief. "Phew, lucky me. Looks like he's not in this room." When she stepped in, she was startled to see the shattered teacup on the floor and yelled, "What is this? Wait, what just happened here?" As she cleaned up, she muttered regretfully, "Oh my, what a waste. If we sold these, we'd feed the whole family for a month." Suddenly a sound rang out, catching her attention. When she saw a black crow staring at her, Anna panicked and screamed, "Is that a crow?" She hastily stood up and stumbled backward. Then Anna, flustered, hurried over to Scoop, ran into her arms and fuss. "Little crow, how did you get all the way in here? There's a very scary person here, you know." His mind was in turmoil. He couldn't believe it. Rand lay in Anna's arms for a while thinking, did I just turn from the seventh prince into a crow? Why would this happen? She whispered as she opened the window, I'd love to keep you, but if His Highness catches us like this, we're both done for. Ran thought helplessly, wait, I am that blasted Highness. Immediately Anna reached out as if to let him fly. You can fly, right? Go far away, quickly. Ran was terrified inside. No, don't let go. That's an order, please, if you let go. She didn't hear those pleas and actually released him. Ran screamed in panic inwardly, no. Staring helplessly at the green trees below, he thought, I'm dead for sure. If I fall, I'll splatter to bits. He started to improvise how to survive now. Just use the wings, right? His eyes filled with determination as he urged himself, fly, fly up. I don't want to die in this corner. And so Ran's wings spread wide. He stared bewildered and wondered, what is this? Ran flapped his wings in the sky in a daze. I can fly, I'm actually flying. Wait, will this let me turn back into a human? Time slipped by in dusk gradually. Ran stood by the window panting, thinking, thank goodness I can still turn back into a normal person. He tested it a few more times to be sure. His face went pale with embarrassment, the ability to turn into a crow at will. Surprising that mere thought triggers the shape chain. Ran was a little unsettled. How did I become a crow? Maybe it's a curse from that crow that latched onto me earlier. Such an ability never appeared in the story. He calculated cautiously. Though I don't know why I have this power, I absolutely must not let anyone discover it. Ran, slightly confused, thought that turning into a crow was an ability never mentioned in the novel, and it could disrupt the plot's progression. This power surely has a link to Manny's. While Ran was still lost in thought, someone outside called urgently, Your Highness, the sacrificial ceremony is about to begin. You must prepare to depart. He turned and muttered, At last the day has come. Ran recalled the story's contents. Once a month the emperor, the princes, and the chief princess gather for this solemn sacrificial rite, an ornate name for it, but actually it's a succession ability test. Of course, the seventh prince has no chance of making the candidate list. He felt a bit displeased, thinking that witnessing it in person felt entirely different from reading about it. The seventh prince must sit way at the far end of the table. Ran looked around and judged that thanks to their blonde hair they all radiated a blinding halo. Compared to them, the seventh prince was nothing but a lone black crow. Just as he sat down, someone sneered, How does a half-baked nobody have the nerve to tilt his head up like that with no shame? Ran looked up to ask who the speaker was. He quickly recognized him as the eighth prince, Zelos Aberon, his 17-year-old half-brother who clearly didn't regard him as a brother. Zelos propped his chin and jeered, This lowly trash still doesn't know his place. Ran relaxed and exhaled, We're both just minor villains here for show. When Ran didn't answer, the boy slammed the table impatiently and shouted, Hey, are you deaf, you bastard? Just then Mento passed by and patted Zelos on the shoulder, reminding him, Brothers should get along. Don't cause a scene in front of His Majesty, understand? The boy hurriedly bowed and replied, I'm sorry, Your Highness Princess. Ran took the chance to size things up. So that's the Grand Princess. From the left then sit the Grand Prince, the third prince, and the second prince, properly seated by rank. Ran quietly concluded that the brighter the hair, the more terrifying the power they possess. In other words, they're the real royal blood. He frowned and thought, compared to them, the true owner of this body has jet black hair, the lone royal born without a trace of Manny's. No wonder his character turned so twisted. And the one said to top all Manny's in the world's legends, of course. At that moment, someone entered. The newcomer had hair of gleaming gold. Everyone sprang to their feet at once, solemnly bowing and calling out, The Emperor has arrived. One hand holds glory, the other holds faith, and destruction rests in those clasped hands. Ran looked at him and mused, The pinnacle of this empire, the Emperor. He stepped in, stroked his beard, and ordered, Don't waste time, begin at once. Watching the Emperor's every move, Ran thought to himself that the blue slab must be the relic left by the first Emperor Prasa, when Manny's energy is channeled into it. The slab measures the user's Manny's amount, with energy beams continuously radiating around. The display of Manny's is very visual. Just look how far the light from the slab spreads. The Emperor's energy beam shot straight to the far edge of the blue slab. At the sight, those around him murmured in awe, Oh, the light reaches the table's edge. No wonder he's His Majesty. Ran felt a bit uneasy though. Does the light normally spread that far? Having finished, the Emperor withdrew his hand and commanded, Anyone who wishes to challenge, step forward. Hearing that, Ran frowned and turned his head. Yaja smiled and raised his hand to volunteer. Your Majesty, I request to try. Ran scrutinized even more closely. There's no strict rule, but tradition holds that only the first prince participates, since once Manny's ranking is measured, it rarely changes. Ran guessed that the amount of Manny's corresponds to each person's power stature. The first prince regularly performs before the entire royal family. To prove who's currently atop the power chain, and to cement who will be the next true emperor, Yaja confidently stepped forward. But immediately his face went pale. Dido panicked, sprang up and shouted, "Elder brother." Blood gushed relentlessly from Yaja's nose. Chaos erupted with people crying out, "Hey, is anyone there?" They frantically called for help. "Hurry, fetch a doctor." Rand's expression turned astonished. Amid the turmoil, only he understood what was truly happening. He looked into the distance and thought, the first prince is about to croak. He's going to spew blood from mouth and nose everywhere. Rand told himself, so the plot officially begins. Manis is a special power in this world, usually appearing only in royals and inherited through bloodline, though each person's ability differs. For example, the first prince uses water manis, while the second prince uses fire mani. The measurement result for the first prince today was basically predetermined. The light he emitted would likely just edge past the table's midpoint, which makes sense. After all, there's still 6 months until that event. Just as Rand was assuming that, everyone suddenly panicked and yelled, "Elder brother, hey, is anyone there? Hurry and fetch a doctor, quickly." Standing amid the noisy crowd, Rand felt puzzled. By the rules, the first prince shouldn't be coughing blood for another 6 months, and the hero appears after that. Then he began to piece things together. But wait, why could the 7th prince turn into a crow in the first place? The previous owner of this body couldn't use manis at all. Rand's eyes widened in alarm. A power never seen in the story suddenly appears right after I possess this body. Is this really just a coincidence? Back in his room, Yaja fumed and cursed. Damn it, bloody hell. He spun and punched the glass before him to shards, muttering that everything was fine this morning, and yesterday had been ordinary too. Yaja's hand began to channel mani. He cried out in discomfort, but Yaja trembled uncontrollably, clutching his face and growling in anger as confusion started to set in. Every time I try to channel mani, my whole body burns like I'm being roasted. Don't tell me I'm never going to use mani again. Please don't tell me that. He shakily stood and told himself that was impossible. I'm the first prince of the Aberan Empire, the next emperor of this realm. Yaja gripped the pipe on the table, thinking to himself that he's utterly different from the vermin out there. Of course he is. After calming himself, he took a drag and reassured himself that it's probably nothing serious. A bit of rest and his mani would. Before Yaja could think further, a voice from the darkness said, "If you want to keep your life, I'd suggest you step away from that vial right now." In anger, he flung the pipe forward and shouted, "Who's there?" Watching the pipe shatter at his feet, Rand quietly assessed that the guy was a cheating monster when it came to power use. As soon as he saw Rand, he sneered and mocked, "Ha, I thought someone sent an assassin. You're just a useless wreck who can't even use manis. Who do you think you are barging in here?" Rand calmly shot back without anger. "If I were an assassin, you'd be dead long ago. You didn't even notice me until I spoke, did you? Someone like me could slip into the future emperor's bedchamber, the empire's second most guarded room, without leaving a trace." Yaja turned to demand, "How did you get into my room? What trick did you use?" He answered nonchalantly, "I climbed the wall and came in from outside, obviously." Yaja spat angrily, "You expect me to buy that?" He didn't care to reply further. "Fine, if you don't believe me. It's not important now." Rand bluntly asked how he was feeling. "Of course your royal physicians will say you're fine, but you know your own condition best." Hit in a sore spot, Yaja let out a short laugh. Then he laughed louder and with a trace of sarcasm said, "All right, now I get it. You actually know how to use your brain, huh?" He angrily accused him of poisoning him secretly to use as a bargaining chip, planning to keep that scrap of a life after I become emperor, right? Yaja switched to a personal attack. "If that's your plan, you're dead wrong, my foolish little brother." Rand paid it no mind, and gently reminded him that in just a week it'll be him, begging for death as blood pours from his eyes and ears. He halted mid-step, grabbing Rand's collar. Yaja blurted in confusion, "What did you say?" Rand sat down calmly on the sofa and said, "Let me make one thing clear. I didn't stoop to dirty tricks or sneaky schemes against you." He calmly recounted, "Your illness will visibly worsen, and then you'll die a grisly death with blood pouring everywhere. Even I don't know who's behind this right now." Rand glanced over to warn, "But I'm just giving you a heads up. Listen carefully to what I say now, because this is your last chance to keep that life of yours." At hearing this, Yaja kept grinding his teeth, as if holding himself back. A while later, Rand transformed into a black crow and flew off in the rain. He quietly breathed a sigh of relief. Damn, this guy really is as gullible and cowardly as the book described. When I left the first prince's palace, he didn't even bother to send someone to tail me. He calculated inwardly that for now he'd just lead the fool around by the nose. At this moment, Yaja was clutching his head in agony. Rand flew straight toward the castle ahead and muttered that this power is really convenient. Thanks to it, I can get to far more places than I thought. Then he suddenly remembered something. Wait, if that's the case, might as well knock out a couple errands while I'm out. Rand hurriedly changed direction and flew off. Time passed and the sun climbed high, bathing everything in warm light. Anna felt a bit flustered. How was she supposed to handle this now? She stood at the door murmuring in a panic. The prince hasn't eaten for 2 days. And there's no sound or movement coming from the room. Anna was terrified. What if something terrible had happened to the prince? She remembered the threat. Anyone who harms the royal family faces the ultimate punishment, death. So Anna hurriedly knocked and called out loudly, "Prince, your highness." "Are you all right?" she shouted. "May I come in?" Just then Ran opened the door and muttered, "What are these lot making such a racket about?" Caught off guard, Anna fell flat on her face to the floor. The bowl of food tipped and spilled all over Rand's shoe. His face looked down coldly. Seeing that, Anna immediately burst into loud tears. "I'm doomed. I'm worthy of death. I was only worried the prince might be unwell." She tearfully explained. Before Anna could finish, Rand spoke coldly. "Barging in and disturbing me uninvited wasn't part of it." He frowned and snapped irritably. "And now you've dirtied both my floor and my shoes. How do you plan to take responsibility?" Anna panicked and screamed that she's truly deserving of death. She doesn't care about this worthless life, but begged him to spare her family. He ordered, "Fine, forget it. Clean it spotless within 5 minutes and get out of my sight." Anna, trembling, replied, "Yes, your highness." She also heard him add a reminder. "From now on, unless I personally summon you, none of you are allowed within the vicinity of my private chamber." Rand sighed wearily. People always threaten to give up their lives at the slightest thing. It's gross. Now there's a clear rule. Hopefully I won't be bothered by these petty troubles anymore. And so the sky turned clear and blue again. Time flew like the wind. In the blink of an eye, it had been a month since the first prince had bled from his nose at the ceremony. Meanwhile, a rumor quietly spread throughout the palace. The first prince, the future emperor, has lost his power. Aside from causing grief among the other princes and princesses, that rumor was basically a beacon, signaling a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Rand slowly recalled from the novel that to quell these rumors, the first prince begged the emperor to speed up the hunting competition's schedule. Though with a slight deviation, this should have happened half a year later. He calmly rode his horse and calculated. Fortunately, things are mostly sticking close to the original plot. The question is whether this is only happening inside the capital, or if it's affecting the hero out beyond it too. The procession rode inward. He thought to himself that today is the royal hunting competition. If lucky, he might meet the guy at the event and hand that thing over to him, after which he'd go quiet and wait for the right moment. Just then a mocking voice rang out. "Hey, you insect over there." Zelos rode by taunting. "That jet black horse really suits your gloomy face, doesn't it?" Rand didn't pay much mind and kept thinking. One concern was that, since this is a year before things start, that guy seems more hot-headed and impulsive than in the book. He told himself to forget the jerk and not engage. He had more important business today. Seeing Rand leave without a word made the other guy even angrier, shouting, "You peasant, how dare you snub me?" Rand stroked his horse and mused that parading a black horse to look down on him. Personally, I prefer black horses to golden ones anyway. Seems the 7th prince at least has a knack for befriending animals. He looked ahead and said, "Finally, we're here." Taking in the scene, Rand couldn't help blurting out that this is the entrance to the royal forest. That's the primordial tower. This year's opening ceremony is being held right here. Rand dismounted with supreme confidence. Once the first prince finishes the rites, the hunt will begin immediately. He privately judged that this was more a political spectacle of factional rivalry than a real contest. At that moment, the emperor arrived. He glanced at Yaja and ordered, "First prince, prepare for the upcoming opening ceremony." Yaja hurriedly replied, "Yes, father, your majesty." From behind, Dito stepped forward and asked, "Seeing my elder brother so healthy, I'm glad. Have you decided what you'll wish for yet?" Yaja frowned, leapt off his horse and shot back. "What wish are you talking about, Dito?" He immediately answered that the winner of the hunting contest receives a wish granted by his majesty. After all, isn't the winner obviously you today? He humored the flattery. Yaja coldly snorted, "Of course, this ceremony is an opportunity for the future emperor to display his Mani's power, a royal show of force before the noble." The people below murmured constantly, "Oh, what an honor to witness the first prince's Manis today, though I've heard whispers of some unpleasant incident recently. SHH, are you insane? What if someone here?" Yaja advanced, grinding his teeth, thinking he never expected he'd be taking orders from that insect. "You better not be bluffed." He remembered Rand's confident face from that. Yaja clenched his teeth and channeled Manis, vowing that if you dare deceive me, I'll tear you to pieces in the most excruciating way possible. Below, Rand smiled and observed, "Look at him, all stiff. Don't get so worked up, Yaja." He felt a thrill like a mischief maker. "Just follow my instructions, and there will be an entertaining show shortly." In the sky, dark clouds rolled in. Yaja was concentrating intensely, to channel Mani. The chi force around him seemed to envelop his entire body. Strong streams of manis swirled and surrounded the area. They churned like a vortex, wanting to devour everything. Suddenly, a large rock smashed into someone's body. The crowd around cried out in panic, "Watch out, don't get sucked into the vortex." They kept shouting to one another to fall back. Everyone stepped back, yet Ran remained standing there with a stern face. He ground his teeth and said, "I am Grand Prince Yaja." Each word came out with difficulty. Yaja raised both hands to the sky and shouted that the one fated will become emperor. All the surrounding Mani's currents quickly gathered into huge dragon shapes. They flew straight up into the high sky. Under that power, the black clouds slowly dispersed. The sky cleared up and raindrops began to fall. Agni said tensely, "So this is the royal magic." The people around began to cheer excitedly. "Hurrah, long live the Grand Prince." Back then, Ran had produced a stone and ordered Yaja to take it and channel his manis into it. He immediately objected. "A stone? Are you kidding me?" Ran explained nonchalantly that it can absorb tainted manis, and if you don't want to be healed, then go ahead and die. I'm not exactly eager to save someone who doesn't care about living. Hearing this, Yaja trembled with rage all over. Back in the present, Ran happily climbed back onto his horse. That bought a bit more time. This item only appears next season in the original, but using it a bit early should be fine. Just then someone came running over, trembling. "Seventh Prince, I beg permission to report." Sane looked like he might collapse, panting as he said that. "As you instructed, I brought the bag left behind," yet Ran only replied coldly, "Oh, so you finally arrived." He shot a cold glare and scolded that the fellow couldn't do anything properly. "Did you bring the bag here intact?" Sane was terrified and bowed his head, thinking, "Damned, how did I even get here on that mad black horse? It's vicious and has injured many. That's precisely why I deliberately brought it to the seventh prince." At that moment, horns blasted throughout the area. The emperor waved his hand to signal, and from this moment on, the royal hunt officially begins. The crowd immediately bustled and ran off. "Should I try to win this to ask the emperor for a wish?" "Don't be ridiculous. The royals will surely rig it this time." Ran on horseback shook his head and sighed that everyone's rushing about too much. This contest doesn't matter to him. Better to keep a low profile to avoid attention. That way it would be easier to find former Grand Marshal of the Royal Knights, Agni Fetus. Meantime, Agni stood in the shade and asked, "Talon, what do you think of the opening ritual for this hunt?" Talon smiled wryly and marveled, "Truly the power of the gods." Agni, hearing that, shared his thought that witnessing that ritual felt like the emperor was trying to intimidate the noble spirits. On hearing this, he hurriedly warned, "Ah, Duke." Talon glanced around and suggested, "Please, those blasphemous words should only be said when alone." The Duke calmly reassured him, "Relax, Talon, who around here could eavesdrop on us." Agni's gaze darkened as he mumbled that there's a reason he's lived to this age, at least up until now. After a while, Ran set off. The royal forest where the hunt takes place is divided into 3 main zones. He held a map of the area. First is the small game area near the entrance, then the medium game area, and the large game area lies deepest in the forest. Ran slowly recalled that in the novel, he had presented the emperor with a golden fox during this hunt. The problem is that detail was only briefly mentioned in a flashback, so I have no idea where to look for it. That's why I've had to turn into a crow to scout this vast royal forest so many times. Golden foxes are hard to find, so I need to mark the location. Ran said confidently that based on the clue that he washed his hands in water right after hunting the creature, I estimate the spot must be on the southwest shore of the lake. He excitedly tugged the reins and told himself he must stay one step ahead to seize the right opportunity. Ran thought to himself that sometimes it felt like it understood everything he said. He glanced at his bag and relaxed. Luckily, Sane managed to bring the pouch, so I was worrying for nothing about him being late. I just need to hand this straight to Duke Agni. Suddenly, the horse seemed to notice something. It immediately reared to a stop, making Ran startled. He stepped down, puzzled, and blurted out, "What's going on here?" Ran cautiously asked, "Why are you standing like that all of a sudden? Are you sick?" The black horse shook its head in denial. So he asked again, "Did you spot a wild beast nearby?" It shook its head again. Ran's eyes widened in confusion. "Don't tell me." He guessed aloud, "This bag is too heavy, you know." Immediately Ran snapped angrily, "Don't be stubborn. Draft horses pull carts, and you're just carrying one bag and one person and already acting like that." He clenched his fist challengingly. "Fine, let's see how long you can last. Keep acting proud, and I'll put the horse on a starvation diet." No sooner had he finished speaking than the horse ran off. Ran could only stand there dumbfounded, watching it go. A quiet low note rang in his heart, "I'm doomed." At the same time, elsewhere in the forest, Talon looked around at the hunting ground and sighed that usually around this time catching a few wolves or deer is as easy as flipping your hand. But it seems luck isn't on our side today. Agony was a bit sad and bowed his head, lamenting that he must really be getting old, a lifetime as sword and shield, yet he can't stand against time. Talon beside him smiled to reassure him. Please don't say that. You're a legend already, my duke. He kept praising, didn't you rack up countless glorious feats as the Grand Marshal of the Knights? Agony politely denied it. Now I'm just an old retired man. Then he asked Talon, have you ever seen the royal family up close? Talon replied blankly, no, only from afar like today. Agony lowered his voice sadly. When you face them directly you'll understand, then you'll know who the truly great presences of this empire are. He reflected that they are gods in flesh and blood. Our house has protected the empire of those gods for 1,000 years. Agony remembered telling his child that day to look out and behold the majesty of this beautiful, mighty imperial capital. Agony instructed Flynn that he's old now and Flynn must take over his position. We must always be proud as a family loyal to the crown. The boy obediently answered, yes, father. Agony pointed outwards and said, look out the window. That's our family's trading guild. We're proud suppliers of goods to the royal household. He smiled with pride and added, and beyond that is the temple. Suddenly a sound made Agony get down and ask what on earth is happening. The driver hurriedly replied, oh my lord, I'm terribly sorry, something jammed in the wheel. He proposed, please step back into the carriage, sir. I will clear it up immediately. However, Agony's gaze landed on the child lying there. Under the wheel were long streaks of blood. The driver remarked, sounds like a nomad from around here. Looks like he was caught trying to steal the temple's royal offerings. He said calmly that in a place like this, such things are common as day to day. Inside the carriage, Flynn asked curiously, father, what's happening? I want to go see too. But Agony barked loudly to stop him. Don't go out. The boy blinked and called father. Agony's face darkened as he told him he must not go outside. At that moment, Agony's eyes went blank and he stammered, it's nothing. Back in the present, Agony looked up at the sky and mused. The boy's not even 10 years old yet, right? He felt a pang, then he's even younger than my son. That child was probably burned in the kiln, so even in such a noble empire, there's a dark corner. Talon behind him hurriedly warned, we don't have time to dawdle admiring scenery, my duke. Even if we don't win, we must keep the duke's family's face. Hearing that, Agony snapped awake and replied, my fault, let's depart. I know a place where a golden fox might appear. Meanwhile, Ran was panting beside a tree. Hauling this pouch is exhausting. I'll definitely turn you into horse meat when I get back. He grit his teeth in frustrated resignation. I can't keep shapeshifting just because of this bag. It would be awful to lose Duke Agony's trail, should I shift form and return. Ran leaned against the trunk and thought about turning into a crow several times to scout. I accidentally learned this forest is dangerous. Even in the small game area, you never know when a predator will show. Suddenly, a rustle sounded nearby, making Ran anxious. Is there really a beast? He began calculating options. Damn it, what should I do now? It'd be a waste to toss the bag and run, but I didn't bring any weapons because they're inconvenient. Finally, Ran decided to throw a stone. Whatever. If it's dangerous, I'll just sprint like mad. Across from him, Talon pushed aside some bushes and announced, I'm sure I saw it, a black horse charging from afar. No sooner had he spoken than the stone smacked him in the face. Ran panicked and wondered about that hair color. Could it be? Hearing the commotion, Agony rushed over asking Talon, what was that noise? Are you all right? Ran quickly hid behind the tree when he realized that blue hair belonged to one of Duke Agony Fetus's retainers, Talon Chrysa. At this point, he had already fainted. He fearfully concealed his presence. I'm done for. Didn't expect to bump into him here of all places. The man out there was the former Grand Marshal of the Royal Knights, war hero Duke Agony Fetus. From Rand's knowledge, he was the one who would become the male lead's mentor in the novel, the man who would later overturn the empire. Rand panicked and hid behind the tree, glancing toward Agony. I cannot run into him here. He recalled the original trap set for him. The plan wasn't supposed to go like this. I was going to ambush at the Golden Fox's lair and frame Agony for treachery, stealing the royal prey. Rand immediately pictured Agony burdened with a heavy sack of stones, then punished absurdly by being forced to carry it through the hunt. That would be enough, but now he clenched his teeth in deep worry. What to do now? Everything's turned into a complete mess. On the other hand, he glanced at the stone on the ground. This rock's pretty heavy. Someone definitely threw it on purpose. But Agony Fetus eyed the distance with suspicion. He couldn't be sure their target was only Talon. Could an assassin be aiming for me? Suddenly, Talon woke in pain and croaked, Duke. He immediately turned to Talon. Yet Agony Fetus didn't lower his guard and warned Talon, are you with us? If you remember anything, say it now. Even Rand began to worry. The Agony Fetus house has guarded the royal line for over a millennium, the Empire's strongest force. I'm just the seventh prince, treated like trash. What if rumors leak I'm trying to assassinate Duke Agony Fetus? His face blank and sweating, he recalled what he had seen. He grew increasingly terrified. This is getting way out of hand, damn it. What now? What do I do? How the hell do I fix this? Talon seemed about to utter a certain name, but what he said was an apology. I'm sorry, Duke. It all happened so suddenly. Ran heard and rejoiced. Holy crap, thank goodness. Agony Fetus then suddenly spotted a dark shape behind a tree. All right, I understand, if you remember anything else. So Ran seized the chance and bolted. This is it. Gotta skedaddle. Run as far away as possible. He immediately gave chase. Stay here a moment. I'll bring the attacker back. In an instant, Ran dashed deep into the forest, but he began to show signs of exhaustion. His stamina was drained. Running while lugging this damn heavy sack was nearly killing him. Ran while glancing back, thinking he's probably far enough now. Losing an old man like that should be easy as pie. Yet Agony Fetus still trailed him closely. Wasn't this crazy old coot supposed to be retired? He chased and shouted, state your name. Are you a rebel or a heretic? I don't care who you are, but you won't escape Agony Fetus. Ran panicked as the distance closed. Crap, he's almost on me. Running, he weighed options. Should I ditch this damn bag and turn into a crow? If only that crazy black horse were here now. Ran prepared to sprint faster, no time to wish. His steps quickened, he could really pick up speed. Ran suddenly surged to full speed, running like mad. Agony Fetus behind was astonished, thought he had him. So why did he suddenly accelerate and even seem to change shape? He angrily swung his sword forward. Am I losing my sight or what? This is annoying. A patch of forest was cleaved away, but Agony Fetus couldn't see him anywhere. Have I lost his trail? On Ran's side, running, he felt something odd. His body felt light. Did I turn into a crow again? Yet the sensation was still of frantically running. Then the silhouette of a black horse appeared, hoofbeats. That damn horse turned back. Its eyes reflected the forest ahead, or rather. In the crisis, he'd actually transformed into a horse. Crazy, seriously. Elsewhere. Dito looked up in awe. Oh wow, big brother, did you really catch it? Yaja beamed at the corpse of the monster before him. Well, isn't that impressive? He immediately put on a congratulatory tone. The victory of this hunt is yours, elder brother, big bro. Have you decided what wish you'll ask the emperor for? He only gave a faint smile. A wish. Suddenly Yaja's face took on a sly look. I've made my calculations too. At that moment Ran was resting under a large tree, sighing. He clutched his head in worry. I'm doomed. Then Ran remembered. He had dropped the sack full of stones while fleeing. He couldn't accept it and writhed in complaint. Damn it, losing the most important thing hurts the most. There's got to be a limit to how wrong things can go, but of course not. His face filled with regret, yet Ran sighed and quickly pulled himself together. Standing here and fretting won't solve anything. Better go back along the path and check. Talon, who was resting, looked a bit surprised. Oh, the Duke has returned. Agony Fetus immediately showed concern for his wound. Is your head any better? Talon waved it off reassuringly. I'm fine, though still a bit dizzy. He then mentioned the recent chase and, more importantly, its outcome. Agony sighed in admission. Shamefully, I lost his trail, whether he's just too fast or I'm truly getting old. Suddenly Agony Fetus noticed the sack of stones. What's that? Talon honestly replied. This pouch. I found it on the way back. It was abandoned in the grass. He quickly bent down to inspect it. It looked rather fine, but why is it full of rocks? Ran, hiding behind the tree, eavesdropped on their conversation. How would I know? Probably some bored prankster. Suddenly he sprang out shouting, startling them. Ah, that pouch. The two looked at Ran in bewilderment. Seventh Prince. They immediately dropped to their knees in salute. We pay homage to the Seventh Prince. Agony Fetus spoke first and asked if the pouch belonged to him. Your Highness. Ran bluntly admitted. Yes, I've been wondering where it went to. Ran adopted a superior tone and demanded, so why was my stuff with you? Did you steal it? They were astonished and immediately denied it. Steal? That's absurd. I only happened to pick it up when passing through the grass. He feigned suspicion. Who wouldn't make up an excuse in that situation? Nobody wants their hands chopped off after all. Agony Fetus quickly swore. I swear on my worthless life and my family's honor. Ran then pretended to worry about Talon. Why is your retainer bleeding like that? Agony turned to him and explained. That earlier incident, a sudden accident occurred. Only then did Talon dare to raise his head. For a moment, the image of him throwing the stone at Talon flashed up. Talon was about to ask, Seventh Prince, could it be that? But Ran quickly moved to grab his head, his face cold and threatening. How dare a subordinate rudely butt into a royal conversation? Truly an ill-mannered creature. Ran continued to intimidate him despite Talon shaking with fear. If he's not quite all there, could you lend me your sword so I can personally set him right? His face drained of color, he stammered. Your Highness. Agony Fetus stood nearby and respectfully begged pardon. My retainer committed a grave error. If you show mercy, I will personally punish him harshly. Rand pretended to accept. Oh, Duke Agony Fetus, your loyalty is truly admirable. He suddenly alluded to an old incident, truly a shining example. A royal hound who wouldn't even blink as his guard was dying. Rand suddenly mentioned Flynn too. Your son will surely grow up into a loyal hound like that. He lifted the pouch and began to enact his plan. Fate has brought us together, so today I'll entrust this pouch to you. Rand wore a sinister look as he handed the pouch to Agony Fetus. It's extremely important. Don't let it leave your person even if you die, he added mockingly. Understood. He looked displeased but had to accept. I humbly obey the prince's noble command. With his scheme complete, Rand exhaled and left. I'll head back now, enjoy the rest of the hunt. Phew, whatever, I feel so much lighter. Still, he glanced back anxiously. Even he thought his performance had been garbage. A bit guilty toward Talon, but at least I planted this seed. Talon now spoke up to apologize. I'm sorry, Duke, it was my fault. Agony Fetus replied coldly. You should count yourself lucky your limbs are intact. Go back and rest. That's it for today. He was about to tell of the attack when the Duke suddenly recalled something about who had thrown the stone at him. Talon pointed at Rand, making the Duke's face darken. It was the seventh prince. He was about to add more. I didn't notice at first. But when he saw the man with his own eyes, Agony Fetus cut in angrily. Stop, you don't need to say anything more. He was now recalling the plot. In the novel, Agony Fetus would have that incident occur during next year's hunt, but that's because his son's death that year changed. So he planned to alter the plot. To make that incident happen in this hunt, he needed to create a strong enough stimulus. On the other side, he also voiced his scheme. The wish I'll petition the Emperor for is to rezone the area around the temple. He showed contempt. Those nomads live parasitically like maggots in the imperial capital. I'll sweep them all away. Rand's expression revealed his intent. Duke Agony Fetus, your future is already sealed. Meanwhile, he also turned his face toward the sun. There stood his silhouette. Later you will revolt against the royal family, for that is your fate. At that moment, someone descended into the forest at dusk. The person prowled stealthily through the bushes. It turned out Rand had been on alert around. I'd circled the sky a dozen times before landing. Sure there'd be no witnesses, right? He felt a twinge of regret for his actions. Didn't expect I'd pull 3 nasty tricks on Agony Fetus and Talon. Suddenly felt like a cheap villain. Wait, I am the villain after all. While Rand was lost in thought, a figure suddenly appeared. Next, right as the hunt ended. The person smiled in surprise. Oh, it's you, Rand. Rare to see you strolling alone in the woods. This is Grand Princess Mental. Rand eyed her warily. The Grand Princess here. Didn't expect to run into her in this godforsaken place. He quickly bowed. I pay my respects, Grand Princess. She feigned intimacy and dropped the stiff formalities. We're family after all. Mental asked where he'd left his mount and why he was walking alone. Rand made an excuse. I just wanted a breath of fresh air. Left the horse by. Suddenly Mental's tone turned cold. I don't understand, she asked coldly, glaring. Why would you lie even to your own sister? He feigned innocence. What do you mean, sis? Mental immediately recounted. When I strolled through the western woods at noon, I saw an ownerless black horse. Its coat looked odd, so I asked the servants, and they said it was your mount. Her tone grew even more nonchalant and bloodless. I personally ordered that black horse put down. Any beast that dares disobey royal command deserves death. Upon hearing that, Rand knelt and apologized. I'm sorry, royal sister. I was ashamed for losing the horse, so I lied. Mental put on a forgiving look. Come on, lift your head. If you keep acting like that, people will think I'm picking on my little brother. After saying that, she turned and left. It's good you returned safely. If you need another horse later, come find me anytime. He kept watching Mental with a wary gaze. That Grand Princess is a tough one. Nobody can guess what she's plotting. Rand pictured her terrifying face in his head, but why did she leave so easily? Maybe her power doesn't affect me after all. At the same time, a voice came from a nearby tent. No, so. A physician was assessing the man opposite. He chased a wild beast, tripped on a stone, and smashed his head on another rock. The doctor sighed helplessly at Talon. I've seen every kind of injury during royal hunts, but this is the first time someone cracked their skull just because of a few rocks. Agony Fetus asked about recovery time. The physician advised. It looks mild externally, but the internal damage is serious. At least a week of strict bed rest. He immediately objected. A week? Do you mean I have to laze through the whole hunt? As a guard, I'm supposed to stay by the Duke's side. Agony suddenly put a hand on Talon's shoulder to reassure him. Your loyalty is noted. He advised. Life comes first, so rest until the closing ceremony. Jack and I will handle the rest of the hunt. Talon still protested a bit, but then he brightened and obeyed. If that's your wish, Duke, I promise I'll fully recover. Agony could only sigh. A guard using the hunt as an excuse to rest, unprecedented in imperial history. Talon, unable to hide his joy, You've never given me a day off, right? My life's dream is just to eat and lounge, if only I had the money. Agony joked, then I'll have to win this hunt to make your dream come true. I'll petition for you to be granted gold mining rights. Time quickly passed into late night. While he slept soundly, someone approached Talon. That person gently placed a letter beside Rand's sinister face, and his morning words flashed to mind. Truly a shining example. A royal hound who wouldn't even blink when his guard's life was at risk. Agony Fetus was holding his head, thinking about Rand's morning remark. Your son will surely become such a loyal hound one day. He decided to step outside for a bit, unable to sleep from the nagging thoughts. Might as well get some fresh air. Suddenly, Agony Fetus noticed something. Next to the tent was the pouch full of stones that Rand had handed him. Agony Fetus decided to take it with him. As he walked, he pondered, today I'll bring my son to the temple. There's something I very much want him to see. Agony Fetus began reminiscing. Long ago, when the world was plunged into chaos and suffering, a savior descended from the heavens. You read about him in books, father. You're talking about the great Emperor Sierra, right? Agony Fetus stood before the giant statue and continued his tale. He was the incarnation of the divine, wielding mystical power, and the one who quelled those who kept sowing war. He spoke endlessly of the founder of the current empire. Over 1,000 years ago, he established a unified realm called the Kingdom of Aberon. He is the ancestral founder of the royal line we serve. Agony Fetus still thought of his son, Flynn, my priceless treasure. He gazed toward the sunrise and recalled his charge to his son. Inherit my legacy and become the proud sword of the crown. Only now did Agony Fetus notice the pouch of stones on his back, so heavy. Why have I been hauling these rocks around? He remained lost in thought. Is it because of loyalty, or is it? Suddenly he heard a noise from afar. Could that horn be? At the same time, people were gathering around something. My gods, all this in just one night. They say the beast's howls echoed through the night without stop. They were talking about the corpse of a giant monster. It seems the Grand Prince wiped them all out, so the hunt's over already. The crowd couldn't stop marveling at Yaja's feat. The royal hunt was supposed to last 4 days, but the Empire's Grand Prince achieved unprecedented dominance in a single night. Then came the proclamation of his victory. I hereby declare you the winner of this contest. The Emperor came to congratulate Yaja. Congratulations on your victory. He bowed and thanked his sovereign. The Emperor immediately asked what reward Yaja desired. By law, Grand Prince, state your wish to receive the Emperor's favor. The crowd buzzed with curiosity. What will he ask for? Didn't the 4th Prince ask last year to purge nomads on the border? He began to state his wish. Recently, refugees have been gathering and parasitizing around the Sierra Temple, harming the sanctity and security of the shrine. Yaja spoke with a smile, aiming to restore the temple's dignified appearance. Agony Fetus grew increasingly uneasy as he listened. He was astonished by the nature of his request. I ask your majesty to grant me the authority to purge them. In Agony Fetus's head a faint voice began to echo, Father, oh Father. In those eyes the image of himself clearly appeared. Agony Fetus suddenly drew his sword from its scabbard, a loyal royal hound, but that child. His drawing of the sword made the crowd recoil in fear and scatter. Agony Fetus's face hardened in seriousness. Forgive me, Flynn, my son. At the same time, a faint call was heard. Hey, hey. Rand's face suddenly appeared before him. Hey, you there. Talon tumbled off the bed in panic. Who is it? I pay my respects to the 7th Prince. Rand showed a bit of concern. Move gently, blood's rushing to your head so you'll feel dizzy. Rand kindly advised further. Later get the physician to prescribe some anti-inflammatory meds. No, bay leaf infusion. He hurriedly obeyed. Yes, sir, but why are you here? He just sighed and replied. Skip the reason. Don't you even know what state the Duke's in right now? The closing ceremonies probably started already. Talon still didn't understand. The closing ceremony, you say? Rand silently urged him to run faster. That's right, go hurry over there now. Talon pushed forward quickly. Excuse me, sorry, coming through. But the sight before him left him stunned. It was the scene of someone kneeling before the Duke. He was trembling with rage now. Duke Agony Fetus, what the hell is going on? He stood there declaring, the Agony Fetus family has served the great emperor since the very beginning, and has protected the royal line from the closest distance for over 1,000 years. Agony Fetus's face was grave as he continued. In my judgment, the Agony Fetus household is better suited for the lowly task of dealing with the refugee masses around the temple. He bluntly stated his petition before the emperor. Therefore, I, Agony Fetus, dare to humbly beg your majesty to grant this privilege. And the emperor immediately agreed. Out of respect for the loyalty you've devoted your life to, I will grant your request. But then the emperor's voice suddenly chilled. Yet it is laughable that your so-called great loyalty would stand in the way of the royal family's wish. Then Yaja moved on Agony Fetus at once. Did you think the Grand Prince would go easy on you?" He sneered. "Have you lost your mind, Duke? Have you forgotten that your current actions are enough to get your head cut off this instant?" He stood ready to accept the sentence. Charged with disrupting His Majesty's sacred ritual, I will atone with this life. Outside, Talon was shouting at the top of his lungs. Duke. Ran was outside enjoying the show. Finally, the drama begins. I wish that guy were standing far away watching this too. Meanwhile, elsewhere someone was drawing water from the river. But then something unexpected happened. He looked down bewildered. What on earth is this? The water had been pulled upward into the air. Did you see that? The execution ritual of Agony Fetus. Can you feel the royal magic you're about to face? The water-bearer looked up icily, the true protagonist of the Dark Header novel, Radel. Then we hear of a hero, head of the Agony Fetus house, a man whose name has been spoken with reverence for millennia because his blood protected the crown through wars, plagues, and political upheaval. He once served as Grand Commander of the Royal Knights, leading the Empire's finest troops on the front lines for 30 years. He fought across battlefields continent-wide, his sword never dulled, his will never broken. He brought the Empire countless victories, saved provinces, ended sieges before they began, and earned a reputation so solid that even enemies winced at his name. And now that man is accused of an unforgivable crime against the Empire, insulting the royal family. The hero-turned-criminal Agony Fetus kneels in chains before the throne for judgment. Grand Prince Yaja stepped forward, his face tight with fury, his voice cold and authoritative as he raised his hand and called on his magic. Moisture gathered from the air, coiling into luminous strands of liquid power at his command. In the name of Grand Prince Yaja, he proclaimed, his voice echoing through the court, I hereby sentence Agony Fetus to death right here. With those words, Yaja unleashed his water magic. The stream shot forward like a living serpent, coiling around Duke Agony Fetus and dragging him into its embrace. Water exploded outward, splashing the flagstones and drenching nobles standing too close. The raw force of the magic stunned the crowd into silence. No one expected the Grand Prince to display such brutal, overwhelming power in public. Inside the violent whirl of water, Duke Agony Fetus resisted. The pressure was too great, he couldn't take a full breath. The water crushed his chest, rushed into his lungs, blurring his vision. Yet through the hazy walls of magic he could still see outside, and there in the crowd stood Talon, pale, eyes wide with horror, trembling, hands clenched at his sides, panic written across his face as he watched his duke being torn apart by the Grand Prince's magic. From inside the watery prison, the duke pressed his lips to form words. His voice was weak, almost drowned by the roar of magic. Talon, why have you come here? You said you were dizzy. Duke Agony Fetus had known Talon was feigning illness. He understood that from the start, but now, in what he believed to be his final moment, he felt something utterly different. Seeing Talon alive, standing, breathing, a strange warmth spread through his chest despite the pain. A fleeting smile crossed his lips. I'm glad to see you well, Talon. He whispered, I never thought our last meeting would be like this, pathetic. His voice choked. Talon, I know this is shameful for me, but please, take care of my son, Flynn, that's all I beg of you. And as he spoke, his gaze flicked over to Talon. Standing motionless at the edge of the crowd was the male lead, 7th Prince Ran, his expression unreadable, face calm, almost blank, as if he were merely observing the weather, yet his lips were moving. Duke Agony Fetus strained to listen. The male lead was saying something very softly, but with purpose. Not yet, the male lead murmured. Hearing that, Duke Agony Fetus felt a spark of defiance flare up. I cannot die yet, he thought. But Grand Prince Yaja had no intention of letting him survive. With a decisive flick of his hand, Yaja raised 2 fingers and sent his water magic shooting upward. Duke Agony Fetus was yanked from the ground, shot into the sky like an arrow. The acceleration was brutal, the air howled in his ear. In seconds, he was among the cloud layers, so high the sun felt almost within reach. Force and speed tore his body further. Blood spurted from his mouth, leaving a trail behind in the thin sky. His bones sagged, vision spinning. Below, Yaja abruptly lowered his hand, and the water magic immediately reversed its momentum. Duke Agony Fetus plummeted in free fall. Talon, held back by soldiers, could only stand and watch. Tears streamed down his face. He wanted to scream, to run, to do anything, but he was utterly powerless. All he could do was witness his duke's execution, while the entire crowd watched in terrified silence at the display of power. Even the male lead stood there observing, without flinching. Far away in a quiet room, Duke Agony Fetus's son Flynn sat studying at his desk. He glanced out the window before a sudden movement in the sky caught his eye. Through the glass he saw a streak of blue light, an object like a falling star hurtling down. Flynn had no idea what he was seeing. He didn't know that that star was his own father being sentenced to death for his crimes. Unconsciously, he witnessed his father's final fall. The water magic had lifted Duke Agony Fetus so high that people across the capital could see, and among the onlookers was Radel, the true protagonist of the novel Dark Header. The moment Radel spotted the blue streak in the sky, he moved. His legs spun, his body lunging forward at inhuman speed. He sprang up, and the ground beneath cracked with the force of his launch. In a single bound, he covered an unimaginable distance, to land directly beneath the falling Duke. Radel stared into the swirling column of water. It was hazy and distorted, but he could make out a human silhouette inside. Without hesitation, he leapt up once more, hand reaching toward Duke Agony Fetus. His hand stretched out, fingers nearly touching the Duke's arm. He was so close, just a little more, and he could have hauled him to safety. But then he stopped, his feet skidding across the ground, carving deep furrows in the sand as he slammed on the brake. A dead end lay ahead. One more step and he'd die along with Duke Agony Fetus. Radel stood at the edge of the area, gasping. I couldn't reach him, he murmured. He watched Duke Agony Fetus continue to fall until he vanished in the distance. Radel was drenched by the water magic, but he didn't move. The scene shifted back to the square. Talon stood frozen in the crowd after witnessing his Duke die right before his eyes. He couldn't process it. He couldn't believe it. He stood there silently, staring at the scabbards and a single boot of Duke Agony Fetus in a puddle. People murmured around him. Agony Fetus had once been a hero. Who'd have thought he'd end like this? What will happen to the Duke's house now? The Emperor stepped forward. This matter is concluded, he said plainly. The man behind him nodded and announced to the crowd that the closing ceremony of the royal hunt would be held at noon. Grand Prince Yaja flicked water from his hand and muttered, just crushed a little insect. He turned and walked away as nobles bowed when he passed. Yaja called over his shoulder, when you grant indulgence, those who don't know their place always wriggle up. The Agony Fetus line is finished. It's hard to believe such an idiot led that house. Talon listened in silence. As he turned to leave, the crowd's gaze followed him. Murmurs turned into accusations. Traitor, someone hissed. Someone spat at his feet. Talon said nothing. He just kept walking. The male lead remained in the crowd watching it all. He thought Talon's heart must be breaking now. Duke Agony Fetus and Talon had been inseparable since Talon became his aide. But Talon was strong. He wouldn't fall so easily, and Talon returned to his tent. Inside, he approached the disordered bed and began tidying the mess. When he lifted a blanket, he found a letter underneath. The seal's crest was unmistakable, the Agony Fetus family crest. Talon opened it with trembling hands. A letter from Duke Agony Fetus. If you are reading this letter, I may no longer be in this world. If so, pray that I find heaven. After I am gone, please take care of my son, Flynn. Grant this old man's final wish. I feel I am about to commit a grave mistake. If that happens, remember this clearly. None of it is your fault. Talon's vision blurred as he continued reading. I, Agony Fetus, head of the Agony Fetus house, hereby declare that, should anything happen to me, I appoint my aide Talon as acting head of the Agony Fetus family. The letter slipped from Talon's hands. Overcome with grief, he collapsed and lost consciousness. At the end of the letter was written, May the Emperor's blessings be with you. Later at the mansion, the male lead confronted the Grand Prince. You've been wasting your magic recklessly. The male lead said, look at you, you're bleeding. You're not fully recovered yet, Yaja. The truth is your condition got worse after the royal hunt. Yaja snapped back. Didn't you say that stone would absorb my tainted magic? Are you saying your cure is flawed? If you don't want to die, you'd better answer me properly. The male lead remained calm. You should release your magic slowly. If you rush it, you'll only make things worse. Yaja glared, clearly thinking, the moment I'm fully healed, I'll tear you to pieces. The male lead continued, your ailment is easy to cure. The only reason you're still breathing is that stone. You should be thanking it. Then he added, there's rumor Talon is still in a coma. I don't know why, but for some reason it makes me feel guilty. Suddenly Talon opened his eyes. He'd awakened from the coma. Where am I? He asked weakly. His body was thinner, frailer than before. He tried to stand, and Steward Pale hurried to support him. My liege acting head, your body hasn't fully recovered. At least let me assist you. I'm fine, Talon said, brushing him off. I need to meet the young Duke. Tell me the current state of the house. Since Duke Agony Fetus is gone, he appointed Talon as acting head of the Agony Fetus house. As Pale and Talon walked the corridor, Talon struggling with each step from exhaustion, Pale explained bleakly, to be honest, the house's situation is dire. All our business partners have abandoned us. Even internal staff have resigned. Our finances are collapsing, and we're not in a position to beg the crown for help. All this happened because of that incident. Just then, the young Duke appeared. The moment Talon saw him, he dropped to his knees and bowed respectfully. Are you all right? The young Duke asked. I'm fine, Talon answered. I'm sorry for causing you worry. The young Duke sighed. It seems many problems arose while you were away. We can't even hold a funeral for your father. Talon was about to reply when he overheard voices outside. Is that true? I'm telling you it's true. He looked out the window and saw two stewards talking. One said the reason Duke Agony Fetus acted so madly was because the young Duke himself is in exile. The other replied, I knew it. That's why it's odd the Duke had a child at his age. We should leave before they start treating us like traitors. Talon's face hardened. Traitors to the Empire, this stain will be hard to erase. He turned to Pale and ordered coldly, cut out the tongues of anyone gossiping outside and bring them to me. That will be their punishment for spreading false rumors about the young Duke. Pale hesitated. Talon's voice grew icy. Do you want me to repeat myself? Pale bowed, I will carry out your orders. Talon continued, we will not hold a funeral. Pale and the young Duke stared at him in shock. Why would you say that? The young Duke asked. Talon met his gaze. From now on, Duke Agony Fetus will no longer be considered a member of this house. I hope you understand, young Duke. The young Duke looked bewildered. Why are you doing this? Talon explained, right now I am acting head of the Agony Fetus house until you become head. My duty is to protect this family. For its honor and survival, I'll do whatever must be done. With those words, Talon removed his glasses. His voice trembled, his eyes full of feeling. He hated what he was doing, but he had no other choice. Somewhere else, Yaja erupted in a fury, his rage tearing through the room like a storm. Furniture shattered under his outburst, vases slammed into walls, papers scattered like leaves in a gale. He shouted that he was being treated like a prisoner, locked in this gilded cage. And he swore, voice shaking with fury, that he'd tear someone limb from limb if they dared imprison him any longer. Then just as suddenly, his breath slowed. Something flashed through his mind. There was something important he had to do tomorrow, a plan, a scheme he must not forget. His thoughts drifted to his earlier conversation with Ran. Ran had told him to announce that the prince was entering the royal forest, though in truth he must not go inside. The prince found the whole thing ridiculous. Explain yourself, he demanded through gritted teeth. Ran answered calmly, almost lazily, I don't want anyone to know where I'm going. If everyone believes you're venturing into the royal forest, then no one else may enter it. That's a simple way to clear the place out. That wasn't enough for the prince. He pressed harder, stepping closer. What plot are you cooking up? What do you plan to do alone in that forest? Rand's answer came with maddening nonchalance. It's for a treatment, which struck the prince like a slap. His face flushed as he lunged forward and squeezed Rand's throat. You're starting to act as if you're important, he hissed. Don't forget your place. The Empire has scholars who can handle a mundane treatment. Do you think you can test my patience? His grip tightened. For a moment he truly considered ending Rand's life then and there, but Rand did not bet. Even with blood rising in his throat and choking him, Rand smirked. Using magic has shortened your lifespan again, he breathed out. The prince's own chest sagged. He doubled over and coughed. Blood spattered the floor, even more than what Rand had coughed up. Yet Rand kept smiling, his eyes lighting with something like amusement. If you stop the treatment now, Rand said between breaths, you won't be able to move properly for a week. Imagine how the crown will react when rumors spread that the Grand Prince has collapsed. Will they scramble to save you or respond differently? Rand's voice dropped. If the treatment fails, someone else will inherit the throne. The prince cursed the next emperor, but Rand wasn't finished. Use your brain if you want to survive. Perhaps because we share the same blood, my patience isn't particularly deep. He stepped back, straightened his collar, and give up any notion of watching me. Vanishing without a trace is one of my special. All efforts to track me have failed so far. Keep trying and you'll only delay the treatment and exhaust us both. As Rand turned to leave, the prince called after him in a rough voice. What is your true goal? Why are you doing all this? Rand gave no verbal answer. In his own mind, the answer was simple. I want to survive. Memories blurred and the story returned to the present. Rand stepped outside, exhaled and displaced. His body shimmered, bones reshaped, feathers burst from his skin. Within seconds he was an eagle. Wings spread wide, he hurled himself into the sky and shot toward the royal forest. When he reached the treetops, he landed on a thick branch. He shifted back to human form and dropped lightly to the ground, his eyes sweeping the area as he moved carefully, checking every shadow and rustle in the underbrush. He searched the forest 3 times, making sure no one was nearby. Satisfied, he allowed himself a small nod. There was a reason he was clearing the whole forest. Even if it meant provoking the Grand Prince into another fit of rage, today he would test his abilities. After recent events, Rand had begun to suspect his power wasn't limited to a single animal. If he could transform into a wider variety of creatures, the ability would be far more useful than he first thought. To find out, he needed a precise understanding of how it worked, what his power could do, and how to control it. The most urgent thing was to learn the necessary conditions to transform into a specific species. The simplest idea he could think of was physical contact. Both animals he'd successfully become so far involved touching them first. To test the theory, he needed to catch an entirely new animal. Starting small, he set up a crude trap, a snare with bait at its center. The bait was top-quality berries he'd swiped from the royal kitchen. If anything loved sweet treats, those would lure it in. It didn't take long. A squirrel darted into view. Its nose twitched, eyes fixed on the berries. Ran thought if he could catch this one he could finally test his theory. He offered the squirrel a few berries. It hesitated, then leapt forward and took them from his hand. Contact established. Ran focused, aiming for the transformation. He pictured the squirrel's form, its quick movements, its fur. Nothing happened. He frowned and began to analyze. Perhaps the new circumstances mattered. In the past he'd transformed when he desperately longed to fly, when he desperately longed to run. Desire seemed to trigger it. He tried to think like a squirrel. What would a squirrel want? To climb a tree, hide in a burrow. But would that work if he didn't truly mean it? While he was distracted, the squirrel bolted and snatched his bag. Before Ran could react, it was gone, scampering up a nearby trunk with the bag clamped in its teeth. Ran cursed under his breath and chased after it. He didn't care about the food. He needed that bag back. The squirrel climbed higher, still gripping the bag. Ran reached up and grabbed the other end. The squirrel refused to let go, teeth bared, tiny claws digging. They tugged back and forth, until with a sharp, sweet tearing sound the bag ripped in two by the time the struggle ended. Ran was a mess, his clothes torn and filthy, leaves in his hair, his face scrapped. He made his way back to the kingdom, looking as if he'd been dragged through the woods. A maid met him at the door with a tray of dinner and froze at the sight of him. "Your Highness, what happened?" Ran smoothed his expression and answered calmly, "I got dirty walking around in front of the palace." The maid nodded, though her eyes said she didn't entirely believe. Inside, Ran thought about how close he'd come to being discovered while trying to transform into a crow. In the end, he hadn't figured out how to switch into a new species. He'd spent the whole day chasing that troublesome squirrel. He told the maid to bring him a fresh set of clothes. She agreed, then hesitated. "The one who brought the squirrel back with them, Your Highness." Ran glanced down at his bag. His eyes widened. The squirrel was still there, curled up among the torn cloth. The moment it saw him look, it bolted toward the opening. The maid gasped, "Are you going to kill it?" she pleaded. "Please let me take care of it. I'll handle it, I promise." Ran ignored her. "New clothes," he repeated. Terrified, the maid bowed her head and hurried off to carry out the order. On her way, she ran straight into Grand Princess Metal. The maid immediately dropped to her knees, head bowed low. "Where are you rushing off to?" the Grand Princess asked, her voice icy. Terrified, the maid begged forgiveness. The princess's gaze fell on the clothes in the maid's hands, and she narrowed her eyes. "Are you stealing royal property?" "No, I swear in the emperor's name, I'm innocent," the maid cried. The grand prince dirtied his clothes while walking in the garden. "I'm only bringing him clean clothes." The grand princess placed a hand gently on the maid's head. Her ability stirred mind reading. For her truth and lies blurred, deception didn't work on her. She sifted through the maid's thoughts, checking if the story was true or merely an excuse to save herself. And then she touched something else. A memory of Ran. Through the maid's mind she sensed Ran's presence, but it wasn't in the garden. It was deeper, much deeper inside the royal forest. In that moment the grand princess realized the truth. Ran hadn't been strolling near the palace at all. He had been working deep inside the royal forest. At that point the protagonist, sweating, said, "What are you going to do? Are you going to keep running? I don't know how you got this far, but this is definitely no place for you." And he was saying all this to the squirrel because it had finally come back to his palace inside the bag. Then he tried to corner it to catch it, adding, "At least I can take you back to the woods. Can't you be caught quietly without causing trouble? If you don't, things will only get worse for you." The squirrel listened, shrinking into the corner. Then he looked at the squirrel, squinted, and thought, even if it's a squirrel, having a rodent wandering around a human's room, especially inside this palace, is just wrong. But it reminded him of the time before he died when he lived in a semi-open cellar. Mice would scrape inside the walls all night, and he couldn't sleep because of it. He thought the plot was shifting a bit from the original. This was getting on his nerve. And he said, "What kind of trouble are you trying to cause here?" Then quickly reached for the squirrel and grabbed it fast. Breathing a sigh of relief, he said, "Finally, I've caught you," and told the squirrel, "Now be a good squirrel and quietly go back into the bag." The squirrel thrashed wildly in his hands and then bit down hard on his hand. The protagonist felt a sharp, sweet pain and let the squirrel go. Left clutching his hand, the squirrel escaped from him. Angry, he snapped at the squirrel, "You little brat. How dare something as tiny as you bite a member of the royal family?" But the squirrel shot off and scrambled up the wall from a nearby corner. Seeing that, the protagonist said the squirrel really has climbed high already. Still holding his hand, he said if he chased the squirrel to catch it, it would run away again. Then he closed his eyes and began thinking maybe at a moment like this it would be easier for him to turn into a squirrel, he thought. Even while he was thinking that, his eyes suddenly flew open and he realized something. Looking at the squirrel on the wall, a brilliant golden aura began to radiate from his body. At first he didn't understand, and then he couldn't believe it and said, "Is this for real?" We see the squirrel utterly terrified and trembling, and the protagonist says, "Finally, I've figured it out. The condition to transform into a specific animal." At that moment, the squirrel's eyes went completely blank, as if it had lost consciousness, and the squirrel began to fall rapidly toward the floor. Seeing this, the protagonist said, "Why is the squirrel falling now of all time?" And to save the squirrel, he started sprinting toward it. You can still see that same brilliant golden light emitting from his body. And just then the door burst open and Grand Princess Metal and the maid stepped in. Before opening the door, the maid had stood behind trembling and said to the princess, shaking, "This is the 7th prince's bedchamber, so I should ask first." But the princess opened the door without listening and said, "Are you telling me to walk on eggshells around my brother right now?" Then the princess stepped into the room and said, "The servants here are really unbearable." And at that moment, her gaze landed elsewhere and she stopped speaking. She saw a small black shape standing not far from her and said, "What is that?" Looking closer, she saw a squirrel and was quite surprised. Not just one squirrel, but two, one squirrel clutching the other down. Seeing the squirrels, the princess thought seriously about the protagonist. Even if he's a child mistreated by the royal family, to think wild animals are roaming around a royal residence. The maid behind her was also shocked to see two squirrels at once, but at the same time, she found both of them even cuter. And the princess said, "Seeing all of this is really messing with my head." Then time skips and we see the next day. And we see that very squirrel now clinging to the protagonist's hand and looking very content. The protagonist said, "Look at this one. This squirrel has been stuck to me like this since last night. Does it know I saved its life?" He sat at the table smiling as he watched the squirrel eat nuts. The squirrel happily nibbled the nuts and you could hear the crunching. He said taking it back to the forest is too much trouble, so just don't let anyone notice it for now. Then with a calm look and a smile he breathed out and thought, "Anyway, I've found a way to transform into animals. Funny that the trigger is such a ridiculous thing when you think about it." First he transformed into a crow, then into a black horse, and then into a squirrel. One thing those animals all had in common. Before transforming, it wasn't simple contact. He had to touch the nape precisely, and that happened with all three animals. The activation condition was extremely specific for something so silly. Then he thought a bit more and said he'd finally found the transformation condition, so now he had to keep moving. But the biggest problem right now was still Grand Princess Metal. From the novel's description, he hadn't expected to think too much about it, but he also didn't expect Metal to be a character with such terrifying expression. But the protagonist thanked Anna, his maid, because she covered for him by claiming the squirrel was his pet, and thanks to that he was able to slip out the window at the time. Truly a last-minute rescue. After that he returned to human form and went back into his room, so everyone would think he'd been in his room the whole time and raise no suspicion. The protagonist thought things should be fine now. But then Grand Princess Metal told him, "Wild beasts inside the palace. Your tastes are really strange. It's very late now, so I will take my leave." Hearing that, the protagonist breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Yes, you're right, next time, please come when." Then suddenly the princess cut him off and said, "Tomorrow." Hearing that, the protagonist broke into a sweat and grew a little anxious. Princess Metal continued, "Tomorrow you will come and see me," and with a serious, calm, terrifying smile she told him, "We have matters to discuss." Then the story returns to the present where the protagonist sits at the table and the squirrel is still enjoying its food. He thought, why did Metal summon me? Has she discovered my power? What does she want to tell me? Or has she discovered my true identity? But what can the protagonist even do? He had no choice but to meet Princess Metal, and with a sigh he said to the squirrel, "All right then, little squirrel." Then the scene shifts and we see a guard bowing and addressing the 7th prince, saying to the protagonist, "Your Highness, the Grand Princess is waiting in her chamber." The protagonist was overwhelmed seeing the massive gate before him and thought, "I remember the description saying it was magnificent, but these are truly colossal doors." Then Grand Princess Metal sat politely inside her glittering chamber and said to the 7th prince, "You must have had a long journey." The Grand Princess and the protagonist faced each other in that large room, and the princess said, "Your legs must be tired, so please sit down." The protagonist replied, "It's not that far, I'm fine, but more importantly, why did you call me here?" The princess cut him off, completely ignoring him and smiling. "Did you not hear me when I told you to sit down?" He paused to think, apologized to Princess Metal for his rudeness, and began to sit on the nearby sofa. After accepting his apology, Princess Metal said with a laugh and a calm smile, "It's all right, your curiosity must have been piqued. You were always the impatient sort." But behind that fake smile, Metal thought, how did this boy become such a different person, venturing alone into the royal forest, a place he'd never been before? Then we see the protagonist, who says he hates the princess for precisely this reason, and that's why he avoids her. Then we learn that magic always manifests as abilities tied to nature. For example, the emperor uses fire magic, and the grand prince uses water magic. And the princess's ability, in a way, stands above the others. The grand princess's magic is called humanity. At that moment, the princess moved her hand toward the protagonist's head, and then placed her hand on his head. Princess Metal's ability can read and manipulate the human mind. With a calm, horrifying smile, the princess told the protagonist, "I hope you will answer me honestly, because it saddens me when my dear family tries to deceive me." Then the protagonist, with the princess's hand on his head, somehow tried to stay calm and thought to himself, "One thing I'm sure of is Metal's ability doesn't work on me, or if Metal's ability does work, she would control the protagonist and extract all the answers from him." Just imagining that made him start to sweat, and he thought, she must have suddenly realized someday that her ability doesn't work on me. And the atmosphere between the protagonist and Metal grew tenser, and the protagonist thought, "Thanks to the novel, I also know 2 conditions that make Princess Metal's ability fail to activate. First, the target must be blood-related to Metal, and second, the target must truly love Metal as family." But for the protagonist, the biggest problem right now is the second condition. Then he glanced up at Metal and thought, feeling familial love for Metal. "No way would I feel anything like that for this woman." Princess Metal, with a fake smile, said to him, "Aren't you going to answer me quickly?" So the protagonist thought, "I don't even meet the second condition, so why doesn't Metal's ability work on me?" The scene shifts and we see a massive waterfall flowing outside a dark cave, its roar echoing through the cavern. Water drips from the rock formations on the cave ceiling, and the sound reverberates inside. At that moment, we see a single drop fall, and then we see that very drop land straight on Duke Agony Fetus. The drop landed right on his face, and Duke Agony Fetus, whose condition was terrible, began to regain consciousness. After waking, the Duke hauled himself up from the ground, but having been unconscious so long, his body was weak and trembling. Clutching his head, Duke Agony Fetus struggled and said, "Where is this place?" Just then a voice rang out saying to Duke Agony Fetus, "You survived." The Duke was shocked to see a dark figure before him and asked, "Where is this place, and am I really still alive?" The man rising up then said to Duke Agony Fetus, "You haven't opened your eyes for quite some time, so I thought you were dead. Now I'll start asking my question." With that, he began to draw his sword and pointed it seriously at Duke Agony Fetus's face, asking him, "Are you loyal to the Empire?" The Duke didn't understand the situation at all and said to him, "What do you mean by that?" Then the man named Radel told Duke Agony Fetus with killing intent in his eyes, "Yes or no, your answer will decide how I proceed." And he held his sword up to the Duke's face, which Duke Agony Fetus couldn't make sense of either. Back with the protagonist, he still wondered why Metal's ability had no effect on the 7th prince. Metal continued asking, "Will you answer me? Why did you suddenly become a different person like this?" Ran kept wondering, if her ability doesn't work, there must be a clear reason. Could it be because I transmigrated into this character? The 7th prince was originally such an obscure minor character that there was almost no information about him. He wasn't even mentioned in the novel. Just then Metal spoke up, "I can hear the gears turning in your head. I bet it's hard to answer." Ran was sweating now, thinking to himself, "What should I do? Can I play dumb? Would she really let it slide that easily?" As to how the 7th prince would react, suddenly Metal withdrew her hand, startling Ran. Then she slowly turned away and said indifferently, "It seems you have no intention of answering. Then I suppose I'll have to use other methods." With that, Metal clapped her hands to summon the royal knights in. The soldiers who heard her arrived immediately, bowing respectfully at her request. She complained, "It's infuriating that my little brother still refuses to speak. So to make him talk, why don't you just slit Ran's mouth with your swords?" Hearing that, the soldiers looked terrified and asked back, "Princess, is he the 7th prince? How could lowly servants like us commit such a cruel act? We cannot obey that order. Please reconsider, Princess." Hearing this, Metal looked tired. She found them noisy. She continued in a sharp voice with a piercing look, "I utterly detest noise." The soldiers immediately felt the aura of authority radiating from her. Without delay, they all drew their swords at once. They all pointed their blades at Ran, and then asked the princess what was going on. Metal replied coldly, "He won't answer, so we'll just have to deal with it, right?" Then she glanced at Ran and said, "Watch your words. Your only way out of this is to—" But before she could finish, Ran spoke up, "My mother is dead." The words made Metal falter. She didn't understand and asked, "What are you talking about? What makes you think that? Haven't you always been in contact with your mother?" Ran lowered his head and protested quietly, "No, that's not it, I mean." An image of a necklace appeared as Ran began to explain. "Before she left, my mother gave me something, a beautiful necklace with a blue gem at its center. She said that as long as that blue light didn't fade, the two of us could meet. But not long ago that light slowly dimmed, and then, without warning, the gem turned black and crumbled. After a moment of panic, a thought came to him that his mother, who had longed for it her whole life, had finally found peace back in her eastern homeland. Metal's face flushed slightly, but it was all a lie from start to finish. He thought to himself that among the many concubines who bore the emperor's children, she was the only one who fled the royal family. The reason wasn't revealed, but people guessed she had run back to her eastern hometown. Some rumors said it was because she gave birth to a black-haired prince. But whatever the reason, she never appeared again by the novel's end. After hearing the story, Metal exclaimed, "I thought you'd hate your mother." Ran only replied, "I'm not even sure. When I was young, I only knew to hate her for abandoning me. But maybe the reason I unconsciously stare east at the sky and take out the necklace every night is that I miss her a lot, probably." Metal asked suspiciously, "Does that change your feelings about the remaining bloodline?" Ran quickly answered, "It's miraculous. Who knew a lifetime of hatred could flip to longing in an instant?" He slowly sat down and said humbly, "Maybe family is like that. At least that's what I think." Hearing this, Metal fell silent. She ordered the knights to step back and reminded them to forget everything that happened today if they didn't want to die. The doors were quickly closed, and they left in haste. After they left, Metal said, "I didn't expect you'd go through such things." Seeing this, Ran wondered to himself if everything was really settled. Metal stepped closer, took Ran's hand, and said, "You must have suffered psychological wounds." Hearing that, Ran was sure his plan had worked. Metal continued, "Even if you're a failed black-haired child, you're still my brother." Hearing that, Ran darkened and thought inwardly, "Is she kidding me?" Ran calculated silently that her ability to manipulate everyone at will would be ordinary if it failed when she harbored suspicion. After all, the seventh prince never sided with the grand princess from the start. Anyway, my lie worked. I'm alive. Of course, that necklace was just a cheap trinket I picked up around. Speaking of which, what happened to Duke Agony again? Originally, he fell into an abyss and lost his legs. Did he get to meet the protagonist in time? He's probably not dead, right? Somewhere inside some cave. Agony screamed in pain. Raidel's voice rang out, "You'd best not move around carelessly." Agony clutched his leg, trembling at Raidel's words. His right leg was broken. Agony slowly assessed the situation. Unarmed, with one leg broken, he had no chance in his current state. Even in the dark, he could tell from the stance and the cold, sharp blade that this guy was extremely strong. The sword point was brought close to Agony's throat, making him roar, "Wait, could you put your sword away first? Exactly what the hell is going on?" Raidel began to explain, "You probably just woke up too. A few days ago, I saw a water orb fly across the sky. I tried to chase it, but it was too fast and I lost track. From the outside, it looked like someone was inside, but since it slammed into the ground at that terrible speed, whoever was in it must have been smashed to pieces." Agony thought to himself, "He's talking about me, the orb from the Crown Prince's execution, but how am I still alive?" He remembered the stone pouch Ran had given him and was a little astonished. Could it be because of that pouch? It seemed it wasn't on him now. It must have fallen during the execution. Raidel continued, "By chance, I found an old man collapsed and covered in blood inside a nearby cave. Immediately after, a sword stabbed right beside Agony, making him panic. Luckily, it didn't touch him." Raidel then growled and asked, "In the name of the god Amica, tell me, are you loyal to the Aberran Empire?" Hearing the name Amica, Agony blurted out, "Could you be?" Agony felt terrified inside. In this situation, to encounter a heretic worshipper was alarming. He recalled past murmurs about people who looked like wanderers around here. Well, that was common around this area. He remembered Rand's words. What a model example. A royal hound that doesn't bat an eye while his subordinate is near death. Your son will grow up to be the same loyal hound. His gaze hardened. "My son, Flynn, my pride and treasure. Follow in my footsteps and become the sword of the dynasty. Destroy all the heretic worshippers who threaten the empire." Finally, he let out a sigh. His eyes steady, he spoke. "I know nothing of loyalty to the Aberran Empire. I only slipped by accident while wandering carelessly. I'm just a doddering old man, nothing